like and subscribe. Now. Overthinkers of Reddit, what unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you are an overthinker? My boyfriend, who has zero history of seizures, narrowly escaped dying from one because my overthinking led me to break into his house when he didn't answer the phone. My overthinking had begun a few nights prior. He mentioned that he bit his tongue in his sleep and woke up with a bloody pillow and sore mouth, but he had no memory of it happening. That for some reason led my overthinking brain to question, wow, did he have a seizure and not realize it? He has zero history of seizures, and we had been together multiple years, didn't live together but spent nights together, and I had never seen a hint of a seizure. But for some reason, this stuck in my mind. Fast forward 2 days. We usually don't hang out in the morning because he likes to sleep in late. But on this day we had an appointment to go see a specific dog at the shelter I was thinking of adopting. He wouldn't answer the phone that morning. I called multiple times before I went to his place, but he never picked up. I started getting a bad feeling but quelled that he's having a seizure thought, because that was clearly so unlikely. Meanwhile, making an action plan for that very scenario, I got to his house and he wouldn't answer. So in a completely not Emmy crazy girlfriend move, I climbed over his fence. Luckily his door was unlocked. I found him unconscious and unresponsive, lying in his back with the sticky remnants of foam all around his mouth. I jumped into action. I rolled him on his side to help curb aspiration, put a pillow under his shoulder to keep him in that position, and called the ambulance. Had I not hopped the fence to get in, had I not driven over when he didn't pick up the phone, had we not had plans to meet up hours earlier than we usually did, he would have been dead by lunch. His kidneys were already shutting down by the time he reached the ER. If he had never mentioned biting his tongue in his sleep, I don't think I would have been overthinking at all. No crazy worries about seizures would have pushed me to go over and find him. Turns out to be a weird brain disease that's bizarrely endemic to New Mexico, kind of cerebral cavernous malformations. Several days later, after we got home from the hospital, I got a call from a friend who said the dog, against all odds, was still at the shelter, as in the very dog we were supposed to be seeing that day. I had given up hope on getting her, pushed it out of my priorities while he was hospitalized, but they had forgotten to take down my 24-hour hold sign on her cage, so no one inquired about her. She's now our miracle dog and is the sweetest animal I've ever owned. My boyfriend wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't made an appointment to meet her. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an hourglass was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an hourglass she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's hourglass. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another hourglass. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. One time, I overthought a concern I had around dry vent fire. When the time came that we had a clog, didn't know, and there was a wee burst of flames, I was fine ready. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old's finger at a park. Completely cut off the circulation. Also the other kid's mom was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. Ah crap, I forgot to pack my nurse. They fit better in the trunk than they do the dash. This was at 9 years old. We had driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst, and packed up all my clothes and spent about an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, the fire is across the street, are you sure we shouldn't evacuate? At this point we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies, and as we were about to lock the doors and drive I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone long enough my pigs wouldn't have made it. TLDR. Helped save my family and pets from a fire because I was an anxious child. Geez, you were a smart 9-year-old. When 9/11 happened, my brother, who was 5 at the time, began packing a bag in case we had to escape a terrorist attack. He packed the essentials like his teddy bears, a VHS copy of Phantom Menace, his favorite toy cars and a random book my dad was reading. He would have single-handedly saved Western civilization. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim open lock cars. I carry one in my car and have been able to help no less than 10 people who have locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town and he needs something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car and I was able to drive over and help. Also have jumper cables that have helped start a few stranded drivers. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know. Stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why. Just did it. The next day the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. Well, what's gonna happen tomorrow? Wear your seatbelt. In college on occasion upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen towels from the shower stalls and unlock their room doors so they had to go to the bar. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop shielding tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my shilling stash. Something similar happened to me at my sorority house, but I just showered for a really long time till they got tired of waiting. I sang and sang and sang. They were my friends and they knew I didn't mind being naked. Okay, I'll just use up all the hot water then. I carry a fire extinguisher in my auto. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. What's a car safe fire extinguisher that can withstand being left inside in some heat? I'm concerned the compressed gas propellant might burst. They make them for cars and can survive the heat. Going on 2 years now in the green on pressure. Stored in my trunk in a car that is parked outside all the time in up to 100°F weather. I always keep an open deck of cards in my backpack. You never can tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost, and he didn't have all of his materials. He had a PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate this statistical principle he was describing. Only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila. I was able to produce a shrink-wrap deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me. So that's nice, too. Specifically in an open deck, like, if you get stuck waiting and play a game to pass the time, you just bin the cards when finished and buy a new deck. Nah, I add the cards to my collection at home. I usually keep an open deck on me as well, but just in case, I have an unopened deck. But once they are getting worn and aren't so easily shuffled, I either pass them off to kids to play with or if it's warranted, toss the deck. Anytime I do wind up opening my sealed deck, I replace it with another. I buy them in the larger box of bicycle decks you can often find at Costco or Walmart. So the sealed deck gets replaced. The deck I just opened becomes my new open deck, and my previously open deck is rotated to my home collection. You'd think, from this description, that I play a lot of cards. I actually don't, and especially not this last year, obviously, though my 6-year-old is becoming a pretty darn good gin, cribbage, blackjack, or poker player. I am an amateur clarinetist. I've played in the local orchestra and the like. My son was in the high school band, also played clarinet. Prior to football game, at the warm-up area, he called me as I was about to head to the game, saying that someone in his section had a problem with their instrument. So did I have a loaner? Now the thing about being a clarinet player is that everyone you know calls you every time they see a cheap plastic clarinet for sale at a garage sale or the like. So over the years, especially when my son was in junior and senior Hi, when I saw one of these for $50 or $100 I grabbed it. Didn't happen every day, but at the peak of my collection I had a couple of beta plastic clarinets in addition to the pretty good wooden one my son played, and Lord knows I wouldn't trust anyone with my good clarinets in BB&A I used in the orchestra. So I grabbed both of these plastic jobs, which actually played okay, and brought them. I pulled the one I thought was the better of the two out of the car and gave it to my son's friend. Meanwhile, he says hey, another person ran into a problem, and I got the second clarinet out of the car. How many clarinets do you have? Was my son's question. It was a proud moment. I've noticed a trend amongst some musicians to just slowly accumulate instruments. I has a friend with a couple acoustic guitars, a couple electric guitars, a pretty nice bass, a frankly unsettling number of banjos and ukuleles, and by far the largest gong I've ever personally seen. Getting lost in a foreign country, relying on phone GPS to navigate. Data stops working, had over-prepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. You can download areas on Google Maps beforehand. It's super useful when traveling abroad. Enduring my dominant hand. As a kid I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do things with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful lol. Have the exact same fear and have been working on training my left hand occasionally. I'm also trying to learn to cut in case I go blind. Honey, the neighbor screaming and running into walls again. I am basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken, no idea how it happened, and I finally got a chance to break out my backup pair. Came for the validation, did not disappoint. Will forever bring way too much stuff everywhere just in case. When I was 11, I always kept approximately 12 to 15 of some combination of pens, pencils, and markers in my pant pocket. Just liked having options and never knew what I was going to need to write on. Sometimes got some side eye from other kids though. Cut 2. At a weekend camp with a bunch of kids, I'm participating in a sort of scavenger hunt race thing. At one point our team sets this task where everyone has to draw or write something. Don't really remember, but there's only 2 pens, about 10 people per team, and another team just showed up, with 1 pen assigned to each team. It's going slow, until you get a pen, you get a pen, everybody gets a pen. Our team screams through the task because we can all write simultaneously, while the other team's left plodding along with their 1 pen. We eventually win. Who's weird now? You. You're still weird. Haha JK. I mean you probably are weird, but aren't we all? Having pencils will also make you popular anytime you travel abroad. I always seem to forget mine and find myself sucking up to the nearest person with a writing utensil. Once had to trade my gummy worms for a crayon. The death of a family member. OCD. When overthinking turns into repeatedly mourning for family who are still alive. Because how would I feel if I never get to see them again? I was once driving on the highway behind a car with a couple of kayaks strapped to the roof. My anxious brain kept saying, what if they fall off the car? Final Destination style. I tried to convince myself that it was an irrational fear, but the anxiety got the better of me and I decided to change lanes and make some distance. About 30 seconds later, cue kayaks. They both slip off the roof and go rolling around the highway. Luckily no one was hurt, but man, that did not help my anxiety at all. I definitely do the Final Destination worries thing too. Usually a big truck piled with giant logs or something. You wonder if some part of you unconsciously registered that the kayaks had been shifting some way. I've read that your body can pick up subtle signs of impending doom in various ways that can make you afraid even if you're not sure why. When my wife and I were getting married and looking for a place for ceremony, we have found this beautiful but quite remote garden. We were signing the contract for the event and I kept thinking that it was quite remote. So I asked, how much time does it take for the ambulance to get here? I became the laughing stock of both families. My then future mother-in-law, who was present at the meeting, Literally fell down from the chair laughing. The wedding organizer remembered it for weeks, telling about it everyone we met. My dad ended every sentence with, "But maybe you need an ambulance for that." My wife was making siren noises when I was saying something we disagreed on. Every family dinner all the aunts and uncles were checking if the ambulance was present. You name it, the entire package. Still, I couldn't get rid of this weird feeling. It would have taken over an hour for the ambulance to get to the garden. After a few weeks I ended up paying a private ambulance to be present at the wedding. Fast forward to the ceremony, as my wife literally walks down the aisle. At the back of the garden I see two paramedics running with a stretcher and my dad squeezing my hand whispering, "That's not of your goddamn business. Let them to take care of it." What happened was that one of our older guests got a heart attack and almost died at ceremony. Was saved by the private ambulance. Ever since then, when my wife tells me that I'm overthinking, I just do the siren noise. That is such an orgasmic level of told you so that you can milk it for literally the rest of your married life. What would I do if my neighbor's house caught on fire? I said I'd make sure my kids were safe and panic, and then we'd run if the fire got close. My neighbor's house caught on fire and I sat outside and watched it with my kids and panicked. I work in childcare and was working at a center that was so draining. I started applying for new jobs and went on a couple interviews. One time, I had an interview with another daycare and was offered the position. I loved my co-workers and ultimately decided to turn the new position down. However, I had this gut feeling that I couldn't burn any bridges in case my current job hit the fan. So when I turned down the new job, I made up an excuse saying I'd love to take the offer but couldn't because of this reason, but would be in the touch sometime in the future. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, hit the fan at my work. I took a month off and then emailed the job that offered me a position and started 2 weeks later. I missed an interview when I had COVID. Now the company won't even look at my applications. Even after I explained the situation, they won't consider me. Which I guess is fair since it is their choice. That's called dodging a bullet, friend. Most people don't find out their potential employer totally sucks until after they get hired. Mace, a person I worked with, was a registered sex offender and he had a thing for me. I told him multiple times that he made me feel uncomfortable and to stay away from me. For some reason I had nightmares about this dude. He was 6.5 feet tall and effing hideous. Anyways, he said he was going to stop at a store that I stopped at all the time after work, and it was obvious he knew my direction when I left. I pull up to this store and he's already there. Walks up to my car and I just roll down my window and spray this dude. And he dropped a billy club out of his sleeve. Everyone always told me to stop being paranoid and stop thinking he's going to attack me or RE me. That he's been to jail and learned his lesson. F that dude. He should have never been let out of prison. For reference, I'm also a 6 foot tall dude who is always prepared for the worst. When I had a tumor removed a couple years ago, I kept the surgical blue vomit bag thing they gave me just in case, in my car in case anyone ever got sick while I'm driving. Last winter I was on a third date, driving on the highway back home with her, and she was feeling like she was going to throw up, could not find the blue vomit bag. Felt dumb telling her where to look when it was in my center console all along. She ended up ralphing in a grocery bag that luckily didn't break. Overthought and forgot. I keep my gym bag in the car so I have a dry outfit after getting into a water balloon fight with my nephews. Also I carry band-aids, tissues, Benadryl and stamps, which I give out frequently. Kids skinned their knee at the zoo, got a bee sting, runny nose, forget to mail the kids FAFSA or your tax return, I got you covered. I worked at a medical uniform and supply store years ago, and they were moving locations. They decided they weren't gonna sell face masks anymore, and were gonna throw boxes of them away. I asked if I could keep them, just in case. They've been moving with me for about 5 years before I actually used the masks. Made my kids rehearse for a fire. We had rope ladders, escape routes and a beating spot everyone should. The 17th of January 18 we put it all to the test. I thank God every day that we all made it out because we were prepared. Overthinking and anxiety for the win. Someone broke into my house while I was in the shower finally, so I screamed F yeah, I get to use my shower gun. All I did really was charge the dude naked while holding a Glock, but the sheer look of terror on his face was priceless. So maybe not quite this, but my little sister, through a long series of events, my parents, who were not foster parents and not looking to adopt, ended up taking care of an infant, who was not at all related to us, whose mother had just died. It was only supposed to be for a few weeks until she could be moved to a more permanent placement. As soon as I found out that my parents had agreed to help watch her temporarily, I knew where this was going. And I had all the initial adoption application paperwork printed out before she ever got to our house. Needless to say, my parents were pretty surprised the day they said they were thinking of adopting her, and I handed them a folder of forms and my handwritten notes on how the process worked. For the record, she has legally been my little sister for 7 years now. I carry some of just about everything in my purse. We were at a beach during off season, and a kid wiped out. I had everything needed to clean and bandage him up. I carried that stuff, renewing when it got old, for almost 20 years before actually needing it. Thanks for the awards. I have a similar experience. I have just about everything you could possibly need to survive in the car if it breaks down or something else happens. I was driving and an old couple was crossing a driveway headed home after a nice lunch out. The lady biffed it on the curb. She had ripped quite a bit of her skin and was bleeding all over the place. I saw them, pulled my car over and was able to hop out, clean her up, and bandage everything up. It felt really good to be prepared and help the frantic old couple. I always carried an extra juice box, snacks and an extra set of clothes during high school because I was always worried that one of the kids in my school with diabetes might get low and need some sugar for the juice box and snacks, and I might get dirty or my clothes would get ruined. The extra clothes. Well, one day the kid in my class with diabetes did need the sugar. As luck would have it, a few days later a girl in my class was having a really bad wardrobe malfunction and couldn't wait for a new shirt, so my XXL t-shirt acted as both a shirt dress for her. My partner tells me I overthink and overbuy groceries because I have an intense fear of not being able to provide for my daughter. When COVID hit and the shops were out of stock of everything, guess who was the one supplying food and toilet paper to said partner? I was in dorms my first year in uni and people always thought it was funny that I locked my door at night. We were all pretty close and I was insinuating people were thieves and trustworthy. One night I heard someone fiddle with my door and I peeked through the peephole and saw someone I did not recognize. Turned out he got drunk in the nearby bar, managed to sneak into the building, and tried to sneak into multiple other girls' rooms. Our names and pronouns were listed on the door. I got stuck in an ice storm 35 miles from home, and because I overthink every scenario I had stashed in my car a plug-in charger, credit card for clothes, motel, restaurant, toiletries and sundries, and cash for the maid's restaurant tips. I don't take anything much into my workplace since we don't have lockers, so I made sure that I had a hidden stash for a worst case scenario commute, and it paid off. The panic attack that the overthinking caused. I do this too. Especially at night. If I don't fall asleep now, I'll struggle tomorrow and then panic about not being able to fall asleep and therefore struggling the next day.